Hi, everyone. Welcome to CAISO Sex and Gender Justice's Wholeness and Justice Media Conference. This is our annual IDAHOBIT Media Conference, where we present our Insights Report, and this year we are presenting 2024. My name is Angelique V. Nixon, and I'm a director of CAISO and also offer program oversight for the Wholeness and Justice Program. I'm very, very honored to be here today and sharing welcome and opening remarks and offering an overview of our Wholeness and Justice Program. I want to welcome our media partners, our community partners and stakeholders, and we've invited you here to join us today. And here you can see our agenda and our team: Kellogg, Danielle, Ray, Akila, and Shanare. And also acknowledging our sign interpreter, Joanna, all members of our team here at CAISO Sex and Gender Justice. Welcome again, and thank you for being with us. CAISO is a feminist civil society organization committed to ensuring wholeness, justice, and inclusion for Trinidad and Tobago's LGBTQI+, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex communities. We do this by developing analysis, alliances, and advocacy. Our mission is to mobilize a forward-thinking, visionary, and human rights approach to wholeness, justice, and inclusion for our communities. And our vision is to be a catalyst for political, cultural, and social transformation that secures and affirms our rights and freedoms as LGBTQI+ people and communities. Our Wholeness and Justice Program was established in 2020 to expand access by diverse LGBTQI+ people living in Trinidad and Tobago to wholeness, justice, and social services. The program is committed to responding to violations that community members experience, with an emphasis on trans, non-binary, gender-non-conforming, and intersex people. We do this through delivering clinically competent, trauma-informed interventions that enable healing and resilience. Clients access a combination of legal, clinical, or psychosocial, and wholeness development services. We also engage in community-level outreach, policy advocacy, strategic litigation, and capacity building for our service providers. And so just to share a little bit about when we say violation, what do we mean? This is an action or an inaction that arbitrarily infringes on a person's human rights. These can occur intentionally, meaning an abuse or violence from a person or authority, institution, for example, or by omission, that is a failure to protect from harm. Examples of violations include, and how we define them, an abuse from authorities or persons, infringement on safety and security, state failure to protect from abuse, exploitation, and/or discrimination, infringement on equality before the law and due process, and an inability to access public services because of discrimination. And at Wholeness and Justice, our philosophy of care and really our framework in terms of how we operate is decolonial, feminist, queer, trans, and class conscious. Our philosophy of care prioritizes those who are most marginalized because of sex and gender, meaning people with diverse genders and sexualities, people living with HIV, and people engaged in sex work. Our approach to wholeness and justice is really situated in the understanding that in order to activate legal and political forms of justice, one must also include support for psychosocial care and basic needs. These are our tenets and our philosophy of care in the Wholeness and Justice Program. Our services include legal, clinical and social, and wholeness development. And you can see here that legal services can include legal advice or legal representation. legal support and referrals through institutions for redress and care, and supporting community members navigating these institutions and processes. Our clinical and social services include psychosocial support, complex trauma therapy, support with social, economic, and personal issues, as well as social services navigation. Importantly, our clinical and social services support our clients who experience violations, in particular, mental and emotional support, while they receive legal services and have to navigate relevant institutions and legal processes. And finally, our wholeness development services respond to client needs that intersect with and exacerbate experiences with violations. And these include addressing and supporting folks around housing instability, food insecurity, lack of access to safe transportation, and lack of access to healthcare, among others. We recognize that supporting the whole of a person and this holistic approach to our work is really vital, and you will see that today as we hear from Kellogg and Kumakalam, our program and research officer who coordinates and leads our Wholeness and Justice Program, as we report on our 2024 insights with analysis and important data. And I'm happy to hand over now to Kellogg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelique. Good morning, everyone. I am Kellogg Mkimaka. I'm the Program and Research Officer with CAISO, Sex and Gender Justice, and the Wholeness and Justice Program. And so what I'm going to do here today is just move through with you the different key findings and interventions from our year of service in 2024, as well as the problems that clients and community members presented with, and the policy recommendations that we've put together on assessing these presenting problems and interventions. It's important to keep in mind that we offer services to diverse LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago. That being said, the community is not a monolith, right? And so the data that we are able to generate through the program is representative of different age groups, gender identity, sexual orientations, and clients are primarily working class people. I want to invite you to have a look at the Insights Report document, which will have expanded analysis on these different factors and the diversity of clients. Moving on, we, as Angelique had mentioned earlier, we offer a combination of services to LGBTQI plus people. So the main point of entry for the program is the experience of violation. And once someone has experienced a violation, upon violation assessment and the determination of an intervention plan, they can receive either legal services, clinical, wholeness development services, or any combination of these services. Next, please. Right. And with legal, we would have had different key interventions. As Angelique would have mentioned earlier, with legal services, folks are able to either get legal advice or referral or legal support or representation in an existing matter. So a thing that we've been able to offer the community is even folks who have not or who aren't enlisted as clients, we're able to provide them with advice on different legal matters through consultation. And this has really supported the community in a number of ways, especially with those who may need advice or information about legal processes, not limited to the experience of a violation, but and may have been may have been unable to otherwise access legal services elsewhere. Just to point out that 82% of our clients access a combination of services that included legal services. And this really points to the violation mandate that we have as a program and what we're able to do with clients. We've also been able to provide documentation support. This includes around name changes, reviewing different contracts, supporting with the writing up of contracts, and also transferring guardianship rights among same-sex partners who have responsibility of and with a child. We've also been able to provide support to migrants as well, who needed support with navigating different pathways and systems for migrant support. Yeah, next slide, please. Part of our work includes strategic litigation, as Angelique would have mentioned earlier. And so we have a number of strategic litigation cases that are ongoing right now, whereby we are querying the experiences of community members as it relates to different equal opportunity frameworks and the experiences of violation, discrimination that LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago face. But separately and also equally, we have our clinical and psycho and social services, whereby we're able to support clients with different aspects of their mental, emotional, and social well-being. We know that, and we understand violations not to be isolated as just like a legal issue or like a legal experience, right? These circumstances and even having to navigate institutions and systems for redress can oftentimes re-victimize or re-traumatize community members. And so our team members offer support in this regard to support our clients, in particular with matters related to discrimination, harassment, family violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, unfair employment dismissals, and other associated issues and traumas. An important part of our clinical services as well is supporting clients in preparation for court hearings, as I had just mentioned. Oftentimes, these processes can be very onerous and can re-victimize or re-traumatize community members. And so we just want to ensure that they are able to navigate these systems for healing and resilience, in addition, encouraging self-advocacy and self-empowerment. And another important part of this work as well is through the casework navigation and support that our caseworker provides in addition to the other clinical services to clients. And this includes being able to access different social services for support, be it healthcare, or for welfare grants and other social services that exist. Next slide, please. Yeah. And so some of the work we do as well with community members, it expands beyond the direct one-on-one interventions that we have with each client. As the previous slide would have shown, we have different public education initiatives that we undergo. Our clinical team hosts different webinars throughout the year to deepen and enrich the knowledge base of clinical service providers in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to LGBTQI plus people, as well as different community care and consultation sessions. However, or in addition, with our wholeness development services as well, this expands beyond just the one-on-one interventions. It's just like clinical that we can have with clients. We continue to engage in different strategic advocacy campaigns, as well as participating in different forums and conferences, different international and regional forums and conferences on the human rights in Trinidad and Tobago, representing the needs of LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago and offering best practices and recommendations for this. Some of our key, as an organization and as a program, some of our key advocacy campaigns include the Adult 3 campaign on the Equal Opportunity Act, calling for amendments to be made to include LGBTQI plus status, health status, as well as age as protected categories. Our LGBTQI plus model workplace policy and sensitivity trainings, which we've been offering to different private and public sector workplaces to ensure that, or to support the creation of an equal and enabling workplace for LGBTQI plus people, complemented by our model LGBTQI plus workplace policy document, the use of different regional human rights mechanisms, including the Organization of American States, of which we are part part of a coalition that represents the LGBTQI plus community at the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights and the General Assembly. And also we would have submitted constitutional reform submission to the Constitutional Reform Committee, making recommendations and advocating for the rights of LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago by way of the Constitution. But these other wellness development services and support or interventions that we've been able to have with community members also extend to different community outreach activities, messaging, and the production of resource guides and public education material, all of which you would find in more information on in our insights document. Likewise, we've been able to provide different types of emergency financial support to community members, particularly by way of food support and other type of financial support. A breakdown of this is offered in our insights report documents. Next slide, please. Yeah, and well, on the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the insights from our year of service in 2024 are informed by cumulative experiences of clients, as well as knowledge gathered through engagements with the wider LGBTQI plus community, which we garner through like some of our community spaces, our community outreach initiatives, as well as our community care and consultation spaces, as well as other related interventions by the program. And so the four main things that came up or that stood out to us are that there is a need for a wider sustained intervention to address state-sponsored discrimination. Now, the state's legacy of misogyny, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination, which is inherited from our colonial past, is evident in the laws, policies, and practices of various state systems. And this oftentimes affects how LGBTQI plus people are able to interact with these state mechanisms, whether it is for social services or to gain access to justice and redress. And so we kind of have highlighted that the state's position to suspend any decisive action in support of the LGBTQI plus community and the recent appeal ruling puts community members at a continued risk of violations and violence without clear access to justice, which ordinarily is a constitutional guarantee, sorry. And so we are calling for the states to engage in a re-examination of laws, policies, and procedures to bring those into alignment, to bring the rights and freedoms of LGBTQI plus people into alignment with its constitutional and international human rights commitment to non-discrimination for all. Secondly, we have noted that discrimination makes diverse LGBTQI plus people disproportionately susceptible to social displacement. And this, from our interactions with clients and the community, this particularly affects those who are young, working class, disabled, or navigating intersecting vulnerabilities such as health conditions, migrant status, financial insecurity, and income instability. Experiences of violence in familial, intimate, and workplace relationships have been the largest contributors to social displacement, including housing instability and food insecurity. In many cases, we've noted experiences like forced eviction from family homes, separation from support systems, the loss of income as a result of these experiences of violence, and these often further compounds existing vulnerabilities. And for those at risk of displacement, there's an uneven access to avenues for social support, which affects how they are able to negotiate with their rights in violent situations and systems for redress. And when clients have uncertainty about their basic needs, they are less inclined to take any action that puts them at risk of heightened insecurities, especially when they are dependent on the perpetrators of abuse. So that includes like family members, intimate partners, and even employees. And so while we have a social services framework that offers grants and financial aid to people in Trinidad and Tobago generally. While Trinidad and Tobago has this, some of its policies and procedures, it precludes LGBTQI plus people from being able to access this. And so the opportunities for interventions are limited, again, because people are unable to meet their basic needs. And so having to kind of accept or kind of be silenced around the violations that I experience and not being able to navigate these different pathways because of the risk of displacement. In addition, violent social systems contribute to the deterioration of individuals' psychological well-being. And so our culture of systemic discrimination, prejudice, the absence of legal and social protections, it predisposes LGBTQI plus people to sustained psychological harm, which our clinical team consistently reminds us is what is called endurance trauma. And endurance trauma, in a nutshell, is it occurs as a result of prolonged or repeated exposure to distressing situations such as marginalization and social exclusion, which LGBTQ plus people in Trinidad have to navigate daily. And so when there are limited avenues for legal recourse and support, and also the fundamental distrust in state systems, many LGBTQ plus people internalize a sense of resignation to these conditions, and it often leads to internalized self-hate or repression, and community members are required to then adapt to environments that deny their legitimacy and dignity. And so this type of trauma, we're reminded, um, it's structural, right? And so so what we have been calling for is interventions, especially as it relates to public mental health, where that really looks at these particular experiences of community members and tries to address them head on, right? Oftentimes from our interactions and interventions with community members, it is the case that when they are accessing public mental health care or services, the experiences as LGBTQ plus people are kind of discounted because one, there is a lack of standardized LGBTQ plus training and sensitivity within these for these service providers, but also it just diminishes the relevance and the appropriateness of this intervention. So when these systems don't necessarily see and or understand the identities of community members and the ways in which their circumstances and mental health are exacerbated by the social like marginalization and those things, then the relevance and the appropriateness of the interventions are limited. And so we are essentially calling for and advocating for social transformation via legal reform, policy change, and cultural shifts that affirm the dignity of community members as a necessary part of intervention towards healing and care. And lastly, the affirmation of dignity and identity is a core human need that LGBTQI plus people share with all others. Everyone wants to be seen, everybody wants to be affirmed. And as it relates to LGBTQ plus people in particular, we we see the affirmation of the dignity of community members as enabling their participation as equal citizens in the civil, political, social, cultural, and economic livelihood of Trinidad and Tobago, and it also enables the community members to fully access and benefit from the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. Which is why the name change processes have been a very necessary intervention by the program for community members as just a step to affirming the identities and just the ways that people see themselves. But more than that as well, we have noted from community members that there is a desire for access to gender affirming care, and this includes sexual and reproductive health and rights, as well as mental health care, as I would have just mentioned. And this type of care is considered as a gender affirming care is considered of the unique experiences associated with gender diversity and equips people with information that's necessary to make clinically informed decisions in exercising their agency and bodily autonomy as well just improving their quality of life. And for the meaningful and reparative inclusion and protection of LGBTI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago, we are stating that attention must be paid to the different aspects of their lives that impact community members' ability to live fully and equally. And so this includes physical, mental, social, emotional well-being, as well as livelihood opportunity. The state is responsible for ensuring the rights of all citizens, and measures need to be taken to ensure that community members can enjoy their rights as freedoms as is the case with other social groups. And we think that a first step, or we affirm that a first step to this is the acknowledgement of state-sanctioned discrimination and stigmatization that LGBTQ plus people in Trinidad and Tobago face. Next slide, please. Right. And just pointing out the issues that community members would have presented with to the program. Namely domestic violence, which includes family violence and intimate partner violence, harassment and assault, and employment-related issues, as well as calls for name changes. And so these issues are the primary or key areas in which LGBTQ plus people are experiencing violations and need support as it relates to navigating systems for care and redress, as well as accessing justice. We have noted the different ways in which the family has been a primary site of violence for community members, and the impact that this has on community members, as well as especially as it relates to the possibility of social displacement, as well as intimate partner violence. In Trinidad and Tobago, through the Domestic Violence Amendment Act, community members in same-sex partnerships are able to access redress by way of protection order through the dating relationship category. But there's still different types of education that needs to be done around that as it relates to law enforcement and judicial systems, especially as it relates to one, sensitivity around community members' needs, and also just awareness of this, the rights of community members to access redress through the Amendment Act. Oftentimes, community members who would have interfaced directly with the police service for support or around their experiences of violence, particularly intimate partner violence, they've essentially been turned away with the excuse being that that's not something that they deal with. And so it continues to expose community members to further violence. But harassment and assault also different issues that community members experience. We see harassment happening in different sites, harassment and assault happening in different sites, including at the workplaces and familial and intimate relationships. And so there is a need for legislative amendments and reform to protect the rights of community members in these spaces, as well as to protect the rights of community members in these spaces, as well as to expand avenues for redress, so that redress is clear, the pathways are clear and concrete, and community members are able to access these accordingly. But we have also noted the different intersecting issues that affect communities members' experiences of violations and violence. In particular, we see how food and financial insecurity, as well as housing instability, are primary areas of concern, and the ways in which the interventions are limited when these different areas, including mental health challenges as well as migrant status, are brought into focus. As I had mentioned earlier, it is more difficult for clients to navigate different pathways for redress, or even for interventions to be efficient when these needs or these areas need to be met. And so which is why we have a sustained call for the expansion of social services to be able to really create an enabling and inclusive environment for community members, and for community members to have needs met in the ways that other social groups are able to through the systems. Next slide, please. as a result of these experiences and these interventions, we are calling or we've made particular recommendations to the state for the to address the need for structural transformation through legal and social protections and guarantees. And so we've been able to identify three priority areas, which include inclusive and expanded social services. I would have mentioned some of those earlier, as well as legislative reform, legislative and policy reform as it relates to different acts, different pieces of legislation, and especially the Constitution as well. Next slide, please, sorry. Yeah. So including protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity to the Constitution, but also making necessary amendments to different legislations, particularly the Equal Opportunity Act, to reflect the commitment to protection of diverse social groups, including LGBTQI plus people and folks on the basis of health status and age. But also providing concrete and responsive mechanisms for complaints and redress, especially when public servants and duty bearers infringe rights. Next slide, please. Lastly, the last priority area being education and training. So we know and we understand that legislative amendments and policy changes mean nothing if there isn't sufficient education and training to back this up, right? So that folks would be able to, community members that being, when interacting with these different bodies, when interacting with these different bodies and systems and public services, they are able to, their experiences are able to be truly and properly considered, being once there has been, as an effect, sorry, of sufficient and culturally relevant sensitivity training around the gender and sexuality. So in a nutshell, those are main takeaways from our insights report, but I want to encourage all of you to have a read at the insights report document, which will be launched tomorrow and made available via our website and mailing list. I want to hand over to our different team members and service providers to provide reflections on the interventions and the experiences of community members as it relates to their areas of service. So we'll begin with our community lawyer, Daniel A. Jones, who provides legal services to clients and community members.
Thank you, Kellogg. Good morning, everyone. So, as a community lawyer, I'm charged with all the legal duties. And our program could not have contemplated some of the legal issues that we would assist our clients with. For example, we would not have known that employment issues affected our clients the most. We could have contemplated the IPV, which is the intimate partner violence, and the family violence. But even the name change service, I didn't believe that it would have been one of our top 4 requests for legal services. So I'll just go through the top 4 services that we provide. Apart from that, we start with. We provide other services, but I'll just deal with these 4. Intimate partner violence and family violence. It's arms of domestic violence. And most persons, when they approach the program, they're not aware of how to make a police report, what to do if they got injured, how to navigate the health system, how to navigate the police station, how to navigate the court. So with the legal consultation, we are able to guide them through that. Then we turn to name change. Name change is a service requested by our trans and non-binary clients because it's compelling the world to acknowledge that, hey, this is the name by which I want to be referred to for the rest of my life, right? I no longer wish to be addressed by the dead name. And now this legal document forces the world to acknowledge your new name and your new life, right? Then we go on to employment issues. So you may think that most of these employment issues are linked to the status of our clients, the LGBTQI community. But strangely enough, it's not only limited to that. Sometimes it has nothing to do with your gender identity, sexual orientation, and then sometimes it does have to do with those two issues. So when someone is dismissed unfairly, or forced constructive dismissal, clients wouldn't be able to identify that that is what actually happened. So the employer frustrates the client at a point until the client leaves the job. And then as do the other clients who they show up for work and then they get don't come back as of today, hand in your uniform and don't come back today. And what the sad part about this particular legal service is that most of the clients come way after the statutory limit of 6 months, so that we can't assist some, and for though others, they are so focused on getting a new job and being able to meet their needs, primary needs, that they don't even acknowledge that they have suffered a violation. It is only during the consultation or during the intake process we are able to identify and show the client that, hey, you suffered a legal violation, human rights violation, what do you want to do next? So because of the issues that came out and the trends and presenting problems from the services provided in the legal arm of the program, our team decided that there's a need for to educate, right? Because, education, knowledge is power. And in order to navigate the judicial legal system, you need legal education. So my team and I have developed a legal process navigation handbook. It's a very, very great tool for our clients, but we didn't just think about our clients, the LGBTQI community, but it's also open for any member of the citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. When you look at the book, it speaks about one at page 8, what to do if you serve legal documents. Page 16, when do I seek medical attention? Page 19, domestic violence, what to do if I suffer abuse at the hands of a family member or intimate partner. Criminal compensation. This is a service provided by the state that most people don't know about that department. So it's there at page 35. Retrieval of documents from a public body, Freedom of Information application, page 37. And it goes on and on, right? So, in relation to the LGBTQIA community, we explain what is discrimination. When you have suffered a discrimination, what to do if you suffered such discrimination based on victimization and other incidents, harassment. So with this guide, and I would encourage everyone here to please look at it. It is on our website. Share it with someone, download, share, because it really assists persons in navigating the legal services, not only at the police station, not only at the court. It helps you at the hospitals, it helps you at the trade union, when to go to a trade union. And a trade union, it also tells you that the fees are nominal when you suffer employment violation, so that the consultation there is free. And it's good, and you get representation of a nominal fee, I believe, of $325, I believe, is how you join a union. And most persons would not have known that had we not placed these things in our handbook. So that is my sharing here today. And Keller, this is my presentation in relation to it. I hope I've covered everything.
Thank you so much for that, Danielle. Handing over to Ray Alabi, our community caseworker.
Hi, good day, everyone. Very excited to be here today to share some of the insights from 2024. Most of what I will be saying most likely reinforce things that Colette would have shared earlier. When we look at queer people, particularly trans and non-gender conforming, they generally face a range of systemic barriers when trying to access things like social services, healthcare, mental health care, food, income, and housing security. And what we have found in our work is that a lot of this barrier comes from discrimination, social stigma, lack of inclusive policies, as well as institutional neglect. So pretty much covers our argument for adding all three in the EOA policy, as well as I want to look really first of all at what happens in the public health care system. There's a lot of the cases really come in with a lot of the stress. It is developmental trauma, incident trauma, endurance trauma, but just needing to understand oneself and one gender identity to navigate life. Let's be real. Let's take a person who is just straight here. Let's deal with people. Most persons who are of queer identity tend to come from low income brackets because they face high amounts of instabilities, whether it's in a family home, finding employment. So they have, not even by choice, but by situation, will have to interface with the public healthcare system. In public healthcare system, there are like three major things that are challenging to persons of particularly gender non-conforming persons and trans persons. First of all, is stigma and discrimination. Simple things like misgendering person. So I have like clients who come in and say they don't want to go to the public health system. They went there before because this is a mass-presenting woman. Somebody referred to them as her, as he, or him, and in the process, it just totally breaks down the trust that should be fostered between the patient and the caregiver. Also, we have situations, some persons may go for, let us say, HIV testing or have a situation where body is, I knew one particular client of ours, trans woman, she had lapsed on her medication, got very ill when she was taken to the healthcare center. But of course, she's dressed and presented as a woman. But by the time they started doing the body, and they realized that this person had some male organs, the healthcare stopped. So we have people who are not trained really to deal with that kind of gender diversity, and it just results in inadequate healthcare. Same thing with medical professionals, mental health care professionals, sorry. If they're not culturally competent in issues surrounding identity-based trauma, internalized homophobia, transphobia, or the impact of family rejection that queer people endure, then having conversations about them tends to be very insufficient. So lately, we have had a lot of people coming in with intense stresses, intense pain, very I find it alarming, the levels of trauma. And they really don't have a violation per se in terms of somebody beating them up or throwing them out of the house or being wrongfully employed, but there's a violation in that they can't even go to a public health care service and get the adequate care that they need. And often they are too either ashamed or afraid, they just don't know. And fortunately for the work that CAISO's Wholeness and Justice team is doing, this is an opportunity for them to get the mental health care support that they need. Additionally, as I started speaking about not being income secure, so then there's a cost as well to seeking mental health care or physical health care. If you're a low income person or you're a sex worker, you don't have the money for probably insurance or seeing private health care, and so you don't even, so not even a choice. You just have to go to the public healthcare system. You have a long wait. You have to deal with people who are looking at you. Randy Rodriguez, one of the trans women who passed about 4 years ago or so, would always talk about having to go to the hospitals, whatever reason, then doctors, nurses, he come out and looking a man address, very derogatory and dehumanizing things that would happen. And imagine this happening at a point in time when you are ill and seeking care. In terms of housing, ISO has been calling for years for housing. I think at least 10 years we have been asking for housing, LGBT plus people, in particular LGBT plus youth. They are most risk for being unhoused or doing what they call couch surfing, which of course puts them at risk for all different sorts of predators and illnesses. And this homelessness or unhousedness, as it were, is so much more significant than that what would happen with their comparative youths in the comparative peers in that same age group. Trans people in particular face eviction or denial of shelter due to their identity. So we had one, and this is multiple layers of oppression here. Trans women, sex worker, migrants. So difficulty in accessing any kind of social needs a place to rent and as an emergency because person was experiencing extreme violence from their partner, physical violence, extreme, very dangerous situation. Call up someone to get to rent a place is available, goes to see the landlord, time the landlord sees the place and makes a determination about who they are and why they are, how they are. The place is no longer for rent. And that is not just one runoff situation. It happens all the time. And even in shelter discrimination. So let us say just recently, about a month ago, we've had another trans person who was unhoused. And his only recommendation was to go to Shamrock in down in San Fernando. And they went there, and because these shelters don't, well, they are male shelters. So into that space, you're at risk of people who don't recognize or respect gender identity, and you're at risk for all different forms of abuse and violations. So eventually, the person left, and I don't know what has happened to that person. When we talk about food security for these persons as well, we try to navigate them to get food cards. But we're going to go back to housing again because you can't really begin to apply for a food card or some sort of public assistance if you don't have a permanent address. And these people are often our clients, a grassroots person. So having secure income or secure housing is the first barrier and often just the last barrier because it's a broken system that is trying to assist people. So even as we go looking for food security, there's food insecurity. I mean, that is probably a global issue, and it's just more intense for persons who are the lower end of the income bracket who happen to be of sexual and gender diversities and facing their own range of minority stresses and discrimination. And how do you help them get on a social service of getting food card or any kind of public assistance support when they don't have an address? It's really like a catch-22. So the race of poverty as well as food insecurity fueled by housing insecurity is just like a vicious circle. And then, for example, let me bring this point as well. So you might say, well, you know, the churches give out food or this organization gives out food. Why don't they go there? Well, I can tell you from the COVID experience that where we have food banks, like the churches or the governments will give money to support food initiatives. These programs operate in spaces that are hostile to diverse identities. So, or may require some sort of gendered identification, and that in itself is a problem for persons of trans experience, and oddly enough, also for persons who are non-gender conforming, because a presenting woman or a femme presenting guy may also would not have that kind of gender identity marker. Lastly, I'll speak about workplace discrimination. I think Tanya talked a lot about how that happens and what happens in that space. But I want to talk about things like being able to look for a job if you're a person of, like I said, you're gender expansive. Being able to present and show up for an interview could be very problematic. You don't dress the part. One of our young non-binary persons was forced to dress a particular way to go to work and feel uncomfortable all day, every day. So all in all, the social services are there. We do have a social navigation guide that helps people access these services step by step, and little shortcuts that we could find, and insights we could say, well, let us attach a worker request to your case so that you could get additional support. All kind of feeds into just discrimination and insecurities, because most times clients not have a house insecurity. I will yield to the community clinician, Akila Riley Richardson, and he will take it from there.
Hi, everyone. So I will be brief because so much of what I may cover may be aligned with what my colleagues have spoken about. So as the community therapist, I use what I call our bridge approach at Wholeness and Justice to support our clients. So I will share that in the chat for your benefit. So bridge, B is for biological insights. So as our community therapist, I focus a lot on the impact of systemic trauma on the neurobiology of our clients, because the research shows that increasing societal discrimination can definitely lead to changes in the brain and changes in brain responses, leading to increased anxiety, depression, and trauma. And so at Wholeness and Justice, we make it our business to always integrate this understanding and integrate neurobiological impacts and our understanding of neurobiological impacts in the work that we do, so that we can support our clients in a way that address both mind and body and support their healing and resilience. As my colleagues would have mentioned, we understand systemic realities and how they impact our clients. So our therapeutic work, or my therapeutic work, definitely includes a recognition of systemic sentiments, right? There's a disturbing rise in hostility toward members of the LGBTQI community. And this disturbing rise, of course, is fueling so much distress within persons' nervous systems. So the work includes a very, very pronounced recognition and naming of that when we work with our clients. In addition, we feel as a clinical team, and when I say we, I mean myself and Ray, that it's so important for future practitioners to understand the impact of systemic trauma on the nervous systems of our clients. So inclusion in education, one of the things that I know that I feel very strongly about is that tertiary institutions have a responsibility to embed comprehensive curricula about LGBTQI issues in their programs. Yeah, we need curricula that prepare practitioners to provide affirming, culturally competent, and trauma-informed care for our clients. If we don't have this in the universities and the tertiary institutions, then graduates and new practitioners risk perpetuating very harmful stereotypes or providing inadequate support for our clients. Because of our very, very strategic and the way in which we integrate neurobiology on our work, trauma-informed care and a development of trauma-informed support is a critical part of the work that I do as the therapist for clients. So you'd see we'd use various strategies from EMDR, IFS, etc. Of course, all of these acronyms or all of these abbreviations may have little to no meaning here, but I just want to stress that our work is trauma-informed and very trauma care centered, right? Though we're focusing on trauma work, we do support resilience in the therapeutic work that we do. So yes, we're guiding and supporting our persons in dealing with grief and trauma, but we also emphasize growth through resilience. Yeah. So having our persons understand themselves differently, recognize their power, recognize their resilience, and recognize how that resilience has been very apparent in the face of the adverse systemic realities that they face. And using our same neurobiological understanding that that we have in this program, we guide the resilience development work using that neurobiological understanding. And finally, a signature part of our work here as a clinical team is empowerment via education. So we do a lot of trainings, etc., as we probably would have mentioned before, where we support community members and existing practitioners in so many different topics that are of importance to LGBTQI folks. And of course, these topics would include things like managing grief, or working with compassion for our clients, or helping our clients manage the stress in their interpersonal relationships. So we make it our business here at CAISO as a clinical team to provide free trainings to practitioners in the community who would like to provide more focused and direct care to their clients. So in summary, we use the bridge approach, integrating neurobiology, recognizing, of course, the systemic sentiments, advocating for inclusion in education, and really, I want to stress that point, tertiary institutions and their responsibility to train practitioners who can meet the needs of the community using a trauma-informed approach to the work, supporting our clients in growing through resilience, and of course, the work that we do with empowering existing practitioners via education and systemic change. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. So just want to thank you so much for coming out. My colleagues, I think, really did an excellent job of highlighting the kind of work that we do as CSOs to combat violence, discrimination, harassment, kind of isolation and social displacement that our communities are facing. And really the work that contributes to social, physical, emotional, and psychological well-being of the members of the LGBTQI+ community. We really want to emphasize the importance, though, of the fact that this work cannot be done alone. And so that I want to really, really emphasize that state action is necessary. We've identified the ways that the colonial inheritance of state-sponsored discrimination really has impacted the human rights and dignity of members of the community. And as a result, it is very, very essential that this work continues to be done on all fronts. So I want to invite you all to look out for our Insights report. It will be shared by email tomorrow, along with our IDAHOBIT media statement. And we will also be sharing this information on our website on Saturday. We also have a policy agenda that will be coming out, so keep your eyes open for that. And we just want to thank you again, our community partners and our media partners, for being here today, and encourage you to look out for more from us. Thank you.
Trying to stop sharing my screen, and I am going